Let's talk about hiring for leaders. Probably one of the more critical things that a leader does. It's important, as we say, to get the right person on the bus. And it's challenging to interview people. And one of the things I find is that many leaders don't spend enough time interviewing and they don't have a process to ensure they're making the best choices. I usually kid some of the leaders and I ask them, would you marry your wife after the first date? And they say, well, of course I wouldn't do that. Why would you say that? And I say, well, when you hire someone, you're with them about 8 to 10 hours a day. Probably by the time you get home at 6 o'clock, you're only with your wife for about 4 hours. So maybe more than a half an hour would be good. Once they kind of change their mindset a little bit about that and realize the importance of really interviewing, we just give them some things to think about in the interview process. We usually talk about, can they do the job? How will they do the job? And will they be motivated to do the job? Really important to look about key accountabilities. Take some time to really think about what are the key things that we know will make them successful, and if they don't have those, that they might not be successful. Next thing is make sure you have a really strong pre-screen, that you're making sure you're not interviewing everyone in full, because then you won't take enough time, but that you pre-screen people to make sure they have the basic things that you need in the job. When you're interviewing them, it's really important to have targeted questions about those key accountabilities that you have. We highly suggest that you use assessments in hiring. People are trained and coached to say the right thing in an interview. And when you use assessments and you're statistically looking at them against what you know has been successful in the job, you have factual information in which to make those decisions so there aren't any surprises after you hire them. One of the other things that we think is so important in hiring is not just the competency that they have to do the job, but will they be motivated in the position? Is this a good fit for them? Is this the right culture for them? You can teach people skills. It's really hard to teach someone to be motivated if there's something that they're not being rewarded at in the job. So that's one of the really important things. And sometimes it's nice to make like a simple statistical scale to see what you feel overall about a candidate. Maybe it's 5 important things and you give them each 20 points, or maybe it's 10 things and there's 10 points each. But at least when you go to make a hiring decision, you're really making sure you're looking at all of the things that you went through in the interview process to make sure you're making the right decision. And then we'll make sure at the end that when you do marry them, it's going to be a good marriage in the workplace.